Hello, Rose. It's really nice to see you. How are you doing?
I'm great, Mike. How are you doing? It's lovely to see you too.
I'm doing fine. Now, I haven't seen you for quite a while, so could you take the opportunity to sort of bring me up to date with what you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. I know it's been a while. As you do know, I did my IFMCP last year. So I've been doing that. And then practice is all online at the moment for obvious reasons, pandemic wise. But so I've been very busy online actually. It's been a really interesting time for nutrition, I think, and people's interest in it. I've been doing a lot of stuff on my social media for cooking. What I'm enjoying is watching people using this time to take time to look after themselves, cook a bit, and venture into different areas of taking care of themselves. And what about you?
Well, I haven't gone through the torture of doing IFNCP. So let me just ask you a couple of questions about this because I've been involved now for 30 years in functional medicine training. And when I first started, there wasn't anything like an organized assessment program like IFNCP is now. It was really a case of us just meeting up and talking and trying to aggregate the information and then go away and work out best how to apply it. So tell me, how did you find that IFMCP process, and what effect did it have on you?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? How where the functional medicine has grown organically to where it is now. So as you say, like it's a really well organized. The course is incredible. When I signed up for it, I mean, it's incredibly in depth. And it extended my knowledge like so much, and it was really hard, to be honest. It was extremely challenging, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I'm so glad that I did it. It's made me feel more confident in the knowledge I had. It's extended my knowledge, as I say, a lot. And also, do you know what's brilliant about the functional medicine program, or just functional medicine in general, is the understanding of how all the systems work together. And I'd say through the IFMCP course, which it's a journey more than a course, it took years, understanding that just brings so much to my practice and the way I practice. So yeah, I feel like I've been doing nutrition for 10 years, and I've been doing functional medicine with IFM for 3, and I feel like a baby compared to talking to you who's been doing it for 30 years. But the journey is just never ending, isn't it? You keep learning and learning and learning and learning. So how do you, for you now, because I know you lecture and talk and work with IFM, do you find that people are really, because also the other thing I enjoyed was that a lot of the people who did the course are medical doctors. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I find really fascinating, is that I was working with people who are medically trained and they are finding a whole new world and a whole new way to practice.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think that language, the dialogue that you're taught during functional medicine training, facilitates a cross-disciplinary communication. And that's something that was missing 30 years ago. It was very difficult to communicate in a way that all parties felt that they were engaged in an information exchange that made sense. The formula that's been created over this last 3 decades is really around 2 or 3 things, really. One is delivering an outcome to an individual that's troubled with their health. The second is understanding how to deliver that outcome by recognizing the intersection of multiple systems operating simultaneously. And I think the third thing, which is the philosophical and communicable element of functional medicine and lifestyle components of that, have been both simplified and complicated. And one of the dynamics is that when talking like we are talking, we could drop into a dialogue around the functional medicine matrix and talk congruently, often looking at different pathways, and understand that each person's had that same exposure. And I'm sure you noticed this, Rose, that we see colleagues entering this world for the first time and they find the language confusing and disorientating. But after a while, it settles quite quickly. And then that allows everybody to share and exchange ideas around an individual. And I think that's a very powerful shift from when I first started, where people generally felt very isolated and operated independently. And in most cases, I had to adopt a very familiar language for medics which wasn't familiar for the world in which we were operating at the time. Yeah. But I'd like to just pedal back a little bit, because obviously you trained 10 years ago, and that gives you quite a lot of skills. You emerge fresh-faced and enthusiastic. So what discovery was it that led you to even think about training in functional medicine?
Well, I absolutely love doing my naturopathic nutritional training. And I think that I'd reached the limit that gave me, and I needed to learn more. I want to know. I think the thing is, as I said, you never know everything in this. It's such a fast changing field, because lifestyle medicine hasn't ever been, it's something that, well, as I said, it's a fast changing field, isn't it? And people are learning more and more and more and more things about, like, how mitochondria responds to breathing, how your microbiome responds to what you eat. And I wanted to extend my learning, and the functional medicine program, and functional medicine was the natural choice for me. It makes total sense for how I want to work with people, how I think you can help yourself feel well. Yeah.
And so as a part of that, I guess everybody that goes through functional medicine training is given the mantra that if in doubt, start with the gut. And even if you aren't in doubt, start with the gut.
Oh, God, yeah.
So you mentioned the microbiome and the microbiota, and this whole language thing, as I was discussing for you, 30 years ago, this was a concept that really fell into a very, very niche area. 30 years ago, I would probably find less than 20 papers in the year being published on this area, as opposed to 20 papers a day these days. Mm-hmm. So how do you feel that functional medicine gives you a skill set to utilize somebody's digestive functionality and the host organisms that they accommodate there? How do you find that has given you a way of identifying points of entry of interventional therapeutics?
Do you mean when you're working with someone? Is that what you mean?
I mean, in terms of because functional medicine expands the synergistic interaction of multiple systems, but it pulls into a collective which you can adjust via the gastrointestinal tract. So the gut sits at the center of this series of messages. And I'm just wondering whether or not functional medicine enhanced your understanding about how to use things to change that area for the better.
Yeah, it's like beyond changed it. It totally opened my eyes to I obviously, as a nutritionist, understand the power of food, but we were, thinking about elimination diets and just how you can shift the microbiome by what you can eat or what you leave out, actually, or so there's something called the 4R program or the 5R, and I think there's even the 6R now, which are really useful, which is a really useful way of eating, which is about the removal of things that aren't great, the reintroduction of things that are good, and the reinoculation of the gut. So I use those models every day in practice. And I often start, actually, if I've got somebody, as you say, who with most people come to me with gut issues. So I usually start with an elimination plan to see how they respond to taking things out that aren't particularly helpful.
And have you found that has given you, I know you've said that the functional medicine training has expanded your range of opportunities or thought processes. Do you find it attracts more complex patients to come and see you accordingly?
Well, I think don't you agree that when you because you spend more time, so whereas before my protocols would be more simplistic, I think, whereas now I feel confident to take on more complex clients, and I feel confident to take their time. I think I used to not feel, so I feel confident to investigate and keep investigating until we get to the answer, or not the answer, but until we get to a point where we're making progress. And I think before when I was a nutritional therapist, or, before I had my qualifications, I think I would feel a bit more rushed. I wouldn't have the knowledge to keep investigating, and the confidence to do that. So that has been a huge change for me. And I think that's what's genius about functional medicine. And even when you hear the lecturers who, like Bob Roundtree and yourself, and, and it's just, you're listening to these people these doctors who keep trying, and they keep testing, and they keep working until they make progress with their clients and patients.
there's an evolutionary component to therapeutic intervention that has a momentum depending on confidence. And so you're quite right, I think, in saying that if you recognize deviation from your expected outcomes, but you have a series of explanations that can accommodate that deviation, it permits you the ability to help guide that person through to the next stage of recovery. And knowledge and comfort of application comes with exactly what you've been describing. And functional medicine 30 years ago, as I said to someone the other day, is that you were dropped into a pool of noise where there were dozens and dozens of individuals providing their own little area of expertise, and you were left to gather all these tools up and go away and try and put them into some form of operational package. And what IFM have and continue to do is to consolidate, quantify, qualify, refine, and ultimately deliver that information in a much more concise way, because there is a tendency, and I'm sure you've noticed this, that if you get involved in functional medicine, you can become a little bit addicted to educational attainment. And you can become a little obsessive. And as a result, you can lose ways that people that come and see you don't necessarily want to hear 14 pages of immunology. They want to hear what is going to make me better.
No, that's really true. But actually, it is what's really the nice position I find myself in is that if there is that person who, because don't you find there's always someone who's trying to catch you out, who's not quite, who's either been told to go by it's usually their wife. I'm not being sexist, but usually I get men who sit there and they're like, I don't want to be here, but she said I have to come, and they want proof. And so actually the thing with the functional medicine is that it's backed up, it's evidence-based medicine, and it's backed up by evidence. So if I get a client who is saying, well, why is that good? It's funny actually, because we were looking at, somebody was asking me about magnesium the other day with sleep, and it's such an off the bat thing that I go, try taking magnesium. And then somebody quizzed me about it, and I was like, do you know what? I had to sort of go, I don't think I've checked the research on that. It's just something that I've done for years. And sure enough, when I looked at the research, not that much research directly like magnesium helps you sleep, but you look up at magnesium and melatonin, you have to go upstream a bit, but functional medicine gave me so I have the ability to go and check it. And that is actually, even I can also not dumb it down, but, simplify it for somebody who's not interested, but for those people who are interested and need that proof. I think functional medicine is brilliant for that, because you can go back and find the evidence as to why you're saying belly breathe for me 3 times a day, because it's going to help your stress.
Absolutely. And so you're reflecting there a little bit on tests, and I know that there's often both an intellectual and a commercial dialogue that takes place in all of our minds when we're thinking, is this person going to benefit from further investigation? Have you looked ahead? Have you take the position sometimes, well, here I am today, where might I be in a few years' time? Have you looked ahead and thought what other tests might come your way?
Oh, yes, but I'd love to hear what you think about this. But I suppose what I'm really fascinated in is personalized probiotic. Because and it's interesting actually talking about the phytobiome, the soil, if we're not getting it from the soil, so personalized nutrition, personalized supplements. But I'm really interested in personalized probiotics, because I think it would be fascinating, if I don't even know if it's possible, well, it's not at the moment, but to get to a point where you can get one especially for you would be amazing, I think. But what about you? I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, probiotics, I first started using these back in the late 1980s, and they were effectively lactic acid organisms from the food industry. So there's been an evolution and a revolution in their application, including the ability now to stabilize obligate anaerobes, which you couldn't normally do so, because as soon as they get exposed to oxygen, they pass away and not confer the benefit that an alive organism could do. Fecal microbiome transplants, of course, are to a degree a personalized delivery, but it's just personalized from somebody else. So you're taking somebody else's personal microbiome and introducing the microbiota that compose that biome into another person's body. And that's produced all sorts of interesting outcomes.
Yeah.
Some time ago, Manchester University in the UK looked at what they call 6 keystone species to replace the idea of a fecal microbial transplant. You took 6 keystone species and gave those in a format that could be taken in a capsule. The ability to quantify what you need is a long way away, because in order to be able to get a sample from someone's digestive tract without forming an invasive procedure doesn't exist quite yet, although we can get a lot of information. But I do think that there's a constant dialogue occurring as people realize that the cost, risk, and benefit associated with ecologically improving that intimate relationship between the organisms that we are harboring inside our long digestive tube and the rest of us functioning is a wealth of opportunity. But the transition from animal and preclinical studies into clinical studies takes quite a long time. You identified earlier on a very strong element of this, which is that we have the largest single modifier of that population is what you put on your fork. And as somebody who specializes in nutrition, that gives you a tremendous amount of power to change someone's behavior, to advocate an outcome that improves their health. Yeah. And nutritionists have long been seen as the lightweight member of the medical community. And obviously, you're naturally going to feel a certain amount of pushback on that one, and it's quite true, you should be, because the power of knowing how to use nutrition, not simply see it as a caloric transfer of energy from plate to mouth, but understand why someone does or doesn't eat a certain type of food is an opportunity to really transition somebody out of ill health and back to being well again. And functional medicine gives us both the direction, the skill sets, and the confidence to be able to use that across a very comprehensive range of complex conditions.
Yeah, that's really true. And when we were talking, something that I do feel very strongly about is that food, a health food is expensive. And when we're talking about getting functional medicine into just, more being used more in a more mainstream way, you mentioned that time and money are the things that can create issues. But funnily enough, when you think about the back end of health and eating, if functional medicine was used early on, then the back end of being expensive, i.e. hospitalization and people needing medication, et cetera, would not be an issue. Do you know what I mean? You'd save money at that end by keeping people healthier for the duration of their life by using functional medicine, lifestyle, food. And the obesity epidemic is one mostly in, with people who are less well off, and healthy food is, as I call it, an elite sport, which just I think is where functional medicine has a huge opportunity to have an effect on everybody.
So looking ahead, where would you like to see functional medicine operating?
Well, for me, in the UK, I'd like to see it operating in the NHS, which I know is, I think it would be really, that's where, and also just, as I said earlier, what was brilliant about doing IFC MCP and what's brilliant about the IFM actually, is that so many medical doctors are now, way more medical doctors than any other, than any nutritionist or osteopath were at the conferences. And so I think mainstream medical would be where I'd love it to go.
Yeah, and I think we wrestle with those two barriers, cost and time, because at a full-blown appointment where you're extracting a long timeline and delivering a strategy consumes more time than the existing NHS structure allows for. So refining that delivery to be able to stratify levels of importance to impact with a simple, agreeable, mutually supported intervention would carve out, I think, an opportunity to divide up those therapeutic interventions into 3 or 4 visits, because the NHS permits for that. You can attend regularly, whereas in private practice, you're normally trying to carve out anything between 60 and 90 minutes to work with somebody.
Yeah.
So if we were to sort of, from my side, you're asking where do you sort of testing, I can see that the ability to measure a wide range of metabolites, thousands of them, very quickly through a single finger prick of blood sampling will move from the laboratory process now into frontline clinical care within the next 4 to 5 years. And that carries with you a historical fingerprint of what you have or haven't been doing, and also shows you what you do or do not need to do. So it'll be quick, it'll be cheap, it'll be fast. There'll be a lot of AI involved with that. And that will ultimately come down to that dynamic between us, which is you come and see me, or someone comes and sees you. You've got the information. Translating that is the relationship that functional medicine allows you to anchor into therapeutic application. But you'll be, rather than waiting 2 weeks for a lab result to come back, or rather than having to do a fairly large blood draw, this will change in time to a much simpler, immediate collection of data, which is then matched off against thousands and hundreds of thousands of similar samples. And a lot of work's been going into this for some time, and I would say that within 5 years, that will become something that's much more accessible at a very low cost.
And that's not so long. 5 years is not far away.
It's like doing IFM-CP all over again. Anyway, look, Rose, it's been lovely to see you and to catch up with you. I hope that you enjoy the progress, and it won't be 30 years again before we have another conversation. I hope to see you at an IFM event in the near future.
I will, I'm sure I will. Lovely to see you, Mike. Thanks.